He never thought his loyal dog would be taken away because of a lie, but that was how it all began, with one woman's pride, one man's silence, and one loyal heart caught between them. John lived a quiet life. He wasn't rich, he wasn't loud, but he was happy in the small things that made peace feel like home. His mornings began with black coffee, his evenings ended with a loyal shadow lying at his feet, his German shepherd, Ranger. Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was John's partner, his therapy, his brother in fur. During his time in the army, Ranger had saved John from an explosion, dragging him out of burning debris, while shrapnel tore the air apart. Since then, they were inseparable. Ranger had earned his rest, and John promised him a life with no fear, just green yards and open skies. But peace doesn't last long when someone like Karen lives across the street. Karen was the HOA president, and in her world, perfection mattered more than kindness. Every blade of her grass stood at the same height. Every neighbor feared her letters. And when Ranger barked at a raccoon one night, Karen found her next victim. The next morning, she appeared at John's door, holding her clipboard like a weapon. "Your dog is a danger," she said coldly. "Our HOA doesn't allow aggressive breeds." John stood tall but calm. "Ma'am, Ranger isn't aggressive. He's a service dog, trained, gentle. He's part of my family." Karen smirked. "Rules are rules. I'll be filing a complaint." And she did. Within days, John's mailbox overflowed. Fines, warnings, printed threats. Unapproved animal behavior. Noise violation. HOA disruption. Each page carried Karen's signature like a scar. John didn't want to fight, but he couldn't let her destroy what little peace he had left. So he took the HOA to court. The courtroom was cold, silent, and tense. Karen sat 2 seats ahead, whispering to her lawyer like she was running a chess match. John sat quietly beside his attorney, one hand resting on Ranger's leash. When the judge called him to speak, John's voice trembled at first. "Ranger saved my life. He's never hurt anyone. He's not a threat. He's my reason to wake up." His lawyer showed photos of Ranger sitting beside kids, helping neighbors, guarding a toddler who had once wandered into the street. The courtroom grew still. Even the judge's eyes softened. Karen's lawyer tried to fight back. "Your Honor, HOA bylaws clearly." The judge cut him off. "This isn't about rules. It's about reason." He turned toward Karen. "You can't punish loyalty. You can't call a hero a threat." The gavel hit hard. Case dismissed. The dog stays. Relief washed over John like warm sunlight. Ranger wagged his tail under the table. Karen didn't move. Her smile vanished, replaced by a silent fury that chilled the room. As she passed John on her way out, she whispered, "Enjoy your victory, soldier. You'll regret it soon." John didn't answer. He just looked down at Ranger and whispered, "Let's go home, boy." That night, peace finally returned. John grilled chicken on the porch, while Ranger watched the fireflies blink through the dark. For the first time in weeks, John felt safe again. He believed maybe Karen would move on. But across the street, behind glowing windows, Karen sat alone with a glass of wine and her bitterness. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, angry, humiliated. She picked up her phone, dialed a number, and spoke softly. "I want that dog gone. For good." The man on the line hesitated. "You sure you want to do that, lady? That's not exactly legal." Karen's lips curved. "I'll handle the rest. Just make it quiet." Outside, Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching, sensing something unseen. He growled once, low and warning, then rested again beside John's chair. Over the next few days, Karen acted like nothing had happened. She waved to neighbors, smiled sweetly, even sent John a letter pretending to make peace. "I hope we can start fresh," she wrote. John believed her. He wasn't a man who carried grudges. He just wanted to live quietly. On Saturday morning, the sky was bright and clear. John took Ranger for a long walk through the woods behind the neighborhood. The world smelled like pine, damp earth, and freedom. Ranger ran ahead, tail wagging, tongue out, happy as ever. When they came home, John filled his water bowl, patted his head, and went inside to make lunch. Everything felt normal until it didn't. He heard it. A sudden slam. A metal door. Ranger barked once, sharp and loud. Then silence. John dropped his sandwich and ran outside. The gates swung open in the wind. Ranger's leash lay torn near the fence. The truck tires had left deep marks in the dirt. He called Ranger's name again and again. No sound came back. Only wind. John searched for hours, running through streets, calling shelters, knocking on doors. Nobody had seen anything. When night fell, he sat on the curb, hands shaking, whispering, "Come home, boy, please." Across the street, Karen stood behind her curtain, pretending to water her plants. The corners of her lips lifted slightly, a cold, quiet smile of victory. Days turned into nights. Flyers covered every pole. John's voice grew hoarse from shouting Ranger's name. But there was no bark, no trace, no hope. And as dawn broke one final morning, John sat on his porch, staring at the empty yard. The leash still hung on the fence, still waiting. He never thought his loyal dog would be taken away because of a lie, but deep down, something told him the story wasn't over. Because loyalty, like Ranger's, doesn't disappear. It waits, silent, wounded, and patient, for the day it returns. 3 nights had passed, but John still left the porch light on, hoping Ranger would find his way home. Every evening, he set out a bowl of food, a blanket, and whispered the same thing into the cold air. "I'm right here, buddy. I'm not giving up." The neighborhood had moved on. Flyers faded, sympathy turned into silence, and even the sheriff's visits stopped. But John couldn't stop. He woke up every dawn, walked the trails, called the shelters, and drove miles across the county with only hope for company. Every corner reminded him of Ranger. The broken fence post, the muddy paw prints, the empty doghouse that used to echo with soft breathing at night. His home, once filled with warmth, now felt like a hollow memory. He tried to believe maybe someone had found Ranger, maybe he was safe somewhere. But deep down, John knew something darker had happened. Across the street, Karen's roses bloomed brighter than ever. Her porch lights glowed like trophies. Whenever John passed by, she offered fake sympathy. "Still no luck, huh?" With that same icy smile. John nodded politely, even though her voice made his stomach twist. He couldn't prove anything. Not yet. Miles away, Ranger lay in a dark shed, chained to a rusted pole. The once strong dog was thinner now, his fur matted, his eyes dim but not broken. The men Karen hired didn't care about loyalty or love. To them, he was just a job, a paycheck. "Stupid mutt," one of them muttered, kicking the ground near Ranger's bowl. "Eat up or starve. Makes no difference." Ranger didn't move. He just stared at the small gap under the door where a thin slice of daylight crawled in. Every morning, that light came, a reminder of the world outside, of John's voice, of home. Weeks passed. Ranger's body weakened, but his spirit didn't. He remembered John's scent, the sound of his laughter, the words he always said before bed. "You did good today, Ranger." Those words kept him alive. Back in town, John's life slowly collapsed. His job performance slipped, bills piled up, and his friends stopped calling. Every night, he sat on the porch, staring at the leash still hanging from the fence. It swung with the wind like a ghost. Then one night, something strange happened. A small piece of paper slid under his door. No envelope, no signature. Just 6 words written in messy ink. "She knows where your dog is." John froze. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He looked outside. No one was there, just the faint hum of crickets and streetlights. He read the note again, every word digging deeper into his chest. She. It could only mean one person. Karen. The next morning, John went to the sheriff's office. He handed them the note, voice shaking. "Please, you have to look into her. I know she's involved." But the sheriff sighed. "John, we already did. We didn't find anything. No witnesses, no evidence. You can't accuse a woman without proof." Proof. That word haunted him. That night, John sat in darkness, his face buried in his hands. The note lay on the table beside a flickering candle. He whispered, "If you're still out there, boy, hold on. I'm coming." Meanwhile, in that cold shed miles away, one of the kidnappers grew impatient. "Karen's done paying us," he told his partner. "She wants the dog gone. Tonight." Ranger heard every word. He growled weakly, chains rattling, his instincts roaring beneath the pain. When they opened the door, he lunged. The chain snapped off the hook, not completely, but enough to make them stumble back. The man cursed, kicking him again, harder this time. Ranger hit the ground, gasping, but his eyes stayed locked on the open door. Freedom was inches away. Suddenly, headlights flashed outside. Karen's car pulled up. She stepped out, wrapped in a heavy coat, carrying something shiny in her hand. "Is it done?" she asked coldly. "Not yet," one man said. "He's tougher than he looks." Karen frowned. "Handle it. I don't want any traces." If anyone asks, he ran off again. Ranger's heart pounded. Her voice, he remembered it. The same voice that used to shout across the fence, calling him a monster. The same voice that lied. That night, the air smelled like gasoline and metal. The men dragged a crate into the shed, muttering, planning something cruel. But before they could act, one of them slipped, knocking over the lantern. The flames spread fast, licking the walls, devouring the shadows. Chaos erupted. Karen screamed, "Put it out." Ranger pulled with everything he had left. The chain snapped against the burning beam, cutting his leg, but breaking free. He bolted through the smoke, through the open door into the night. Behind him, the shed exploded in a wave of heat. Flames roared high into the sky. He ran, limping, bleeding, but free. He didn't know where he was going. He just followed the scent of pine and asphalt, the faint memory of home, of John's voice. For miles he ran until his legs gave out. He collapsed under a tree by the highway, the world spinning into darkness. By the time he woke, the sun had risen. A truck driver found him lying near the road and took him to a local shelter. They cleaned his wounds, gave him water, and posted his picture online. But his tag was gone. His name was gone. To the world, he was just another stray. Back in John's town, months passed. He still checked every shelter site, but none of the photos looked like Ranger. Life turned gray. Karen, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had happened. New car, new dress, same cruel smile. The fire had been ruled an accident. The men disappeared. And everyone forgot. Everyone except the one who had escaped the fire. 3 years later, a small-town winter fair opened 2 counties away. Families laughed, kids played, and in the corner near the animal rescue booth, a scarred dog sat tied to a post. A cardboard sign hung around his neck. "Adopt me $1. And that's when John, visiting for the weekend, froze in his tracks. His heart stopped. His breath caught. Because the dog with the broken fur and the weary eyes looked up and recognized him first. The light returned to those eyes. The tail twitched. And even before John spoke his name, Ranger knew. The fairgrounds smelled of cinnamon, diesel, and cold winter air. Laughter floated through the crowd, echoing against tents strung with yellow lights. John wandered quietly between the booths, trying to remember what joy used to feel like. He hadn't planned to come. A coworker had begged him to tag along, saying he needed fresh air. John only agreed because the night felt too heavy to stay home again. He moved past a carousel, his breath fogging in the air, then stopped. Across the field, near the animal rescue stand, sat a dog tied to a post. The fur was thinner, scarred in patches, and one ear drooped slightly. But the eyes, those deep amber eyes, were the same. Ranger. John's heart slammed against his ribs. The noise of the fair vanished. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He thought he was dreaming, but the dog lifted his head slowly and froze too. Recognition lit those tired eyes like dawn breaking after a long storm. The tail gave a weak twitch. Then another. John whispered, "Ranger?" The dog let out a single soft whine, half cry, half hope. John dropped to his knees, tears stinging before he even reached the rope. "It's you. Oh God, it's really you." Ranger crawled forward until the leash pulled tight. John reached out, trembling. When his hand touched that familiar fur, rough and scarred but real, Ranger pressed his face against his chest and shook. The crowd didn't exist anymore. Only the sound of a broken man and a faithful soul finding each other again after 3 years of nightmares. People nearby began whispering. A volunteer stepped closer. "Sir, do you know that dog?" John wiped his face. "He's mine. His name's Ranger." She looked surprised. "Are you sure? He was brought in as a stray. No tag, no chip. Poor thing's been through hell." "I know," John said softly. "We both have." He tried to untie the rope, but the volunteer hesitated. "You'll have to fill out adoption forms, sir. The dog's technically up for adoption today. Price is $1.
John almost laughed.
$1, he repeated, staring at the cardboard sign hanging from Ranger's neck. The same price someone had once decided his best friend was worth. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crumpled bill, and placed it in her hand. "Keep the change." The volunteer smiled faintly and handed him the paperwork. "He's yours again." John crouched, clipping on a new leash the shelter had given him. "Let's go home, boy." But even as he said it, the back of his neck prickled. A cold feeling crept up his spine, the kind that said someone was watching. Across the fairground, just beyond the lights, a woman stood half-hidden behind a cotton candy stall. Her fur coat gleamed in the pale glow.
Karen.
She hadn't changed much, still composed, still proud, but when her eyes met John's, something flickered there. Shock.
Fear.
Then anger. John froze. Ranger sensed it too. His ears twitched, a low growl forming deep in his chest. Karen quickly turned away, disappearing into the crowd. John's friend noticed his face. "You okay?" "Yeah," he lied. "Just thought I saw someone I used to know." But his mind raced. How could she be here? Out of all places. Why now? He tried to push the thought away as they walked to his truck, but every shadow seemed alive. Every sound behind him made Ranger tense. When they reached the parking lot, John opened the passenger door. Ranger hesitated for a second, then climbed in slowly. The seat creaked under his weight. John stroked his neck gently. "You're safe now. I promise." The engine hummed, headlights cutting through the mist. But behind them, a black SUV idled near the exit. Inside, Karen sat gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. Her reflection glared back at her from the windshield. "He wasn't supposed to find him," she whispered. "Not him. Not after all this time." Ranger rested his head on John's lap during the long drive. The world passed in streaks of white and red lights. John kept glancing down, afraid that if he blinked, the dog might vanish again. When they reached the small rental cabin 2 towns over, Ranger hesitated at the door like he wasn't sure he belonged there. John knelt beside him. "You're home, buddy. No one's taking you again." Ranger sniffed the room, circling slowly, then lay beside the fireplace, curling into the warmth. His eyes closed, but his ears stayed alert. John sat beside him, running his hand along the old scars hidden beneath the fur. Each mark told a story he didn't yet know. "What did they do to you, boy?" he whispered. The logs crackled, filling the silence. Ranger stirred, letting out a low whimper in his sleep. John felt tears sting again, but this time they were mixed with gratitude. Outside, the wind howled softly through the pines. And somewhere far away, tires crunched over gravel. Karen's SUV stopped at the edge of the forest road. She looked toward the faint light of John's cabin in the distance. Her voice trembled with rage. "You think you won, soldier? This isn't over." The following days were quiet but uneasy. Ranger began to heal, eating better, moving easier, even wagging his tail again. But sometimes at night, he'd wake suddenly, growling at nothing, staring out the window. John followed his gaze more than once and thought he saw headlights vanish between the trees. He started locking the doors, keeping a flashlight and a phone beside his bed. Then one evening, Ranger brought something to the porch, a torn piece of cloth, stiff with dirt and ash. John recognized the pattern instantly. It matched the jacket one of Karen's hired men had worn in the police photos from the fire 3 years ago. John knelt slowly, the cold wind brushing his face. "Where did you get this, boy?" Ranger looked toward the woods, tail low, eyes dark and steady. He gave a small bark, then another, urging John to follow. John's heart pounded. Part of him wanted to forget, to stay safe and quiet. But he knew this moment had come for a reason. He grabbed his coat, his flashlight, and whispered, "All right, Ranger. Lead the way." As they disappeared into the darkness, the porch light flickered behind them, the same light that had once waited for a dog who never came home. Now it burned again, not for hope, but for justice. The forest was silent that night, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. John followed behind Ranger, his flashlight trembling in his hand, the beam cutting through cold mist. The air smelled of rain and pine, heavy with something waiting to happen. Ranger moved with purpose. His steps were slow, but his eyes, those deep amber eyes, were locked on something unseen. Each growl under his breath sounded like memory, like pain finding its way home. John whispered, "Easy, boy. Show me where." They reached an old logging road, half swallowed by weeds. Rusted Kens lay buried in mud. And then Ranger stopped. His body stiffened. He sniffed the air, then began to dig near a fallen log. Within minutes, the dirt gave way to something metallic. John knelt beside him, brushing away the soil. It was a burned license plate, partially melted, numbers still visible. John's heart sank. He recognized it, the truck from the fire. Before he could speak, Ranger barked sharply, staring toward a flicker of light in the distance, a small cabin hidden behind the trees. Smoke rose from its chimney. John's pulse quickened. "Let's end this." They moved closer, each step echoing in the damp air. Through the window, he saw 2 men inside, older, rougher, but recognizable. The same faces from the police photos. The same eyes that once looked down on Ranger with cruelty. Ranger growled, teeth bared, but John placed a hand on his head. "Not yet." He dialed the sheriff. "It's John. I found them. The men who took my dog." But before he could explain more, the cabin door creaked open. One of the men stepped out, cigarette glowing in the dark. His eyes met John's. "You shouldn't be here." The world seemed to pause. Then lightning flashed, sharp, white, cutting the sky apart. Ranger lunged. The man dropped his cigarette, stumbling backward as the dog's growl filled the woods. John shouted his name, but Ranger didn't need orders now. He wasn't attacking out of rage, he was reclaiming what was stolen. The man tried to grab a stick, but Ranger knocked it from his hand, forcing him down into the mud. The second man ran out, shouting, but froze when he saw those amber eyes. John stepped forward. "You remember him, don't you?" The second man backed away. "It wasn't my idea. She made us do it." "She?" John demanded. "Karen," the man cried, voice cracking. "It was her plan. She paid us, told us to make it look like an accident. We didn't mean to hurt him, we just—" Thunder rolled over his words. John's voice went cold. "Then tell the sheriff yourself." As if on cue, red and blue lights flickered in the distance. The men were surrounded before they could run. The storm broke overhead, rain slamming against the earth. While deputies cuffed the men, John looked at Ranger. The dog stood still in the downpour, staring beyond the trees, toward the town, toward the woman who had started it all. "Come on, boy," John whispered. "It's time." By morning, news of the arrest spread fast. Karen tried to pretend she didn't know anything, but the walls were closing in. Her mirror reflected a face she barely recognized, tired eyes, trembling hands. She poured herself another drink, trying to drown the sound of thunder still echoing in her mind. Every time lightning flashed, she swore she saw Ranger's eyes staring back at her. Outside, the wind grew louder. She stepped onto her porch, robe fluttering, muttering to herself. "You think you can haunt me, Mutt? You're gone." But the night didn't agree. In the distance, sirens wailed. Then a knock thundered at her door, 3 sharp, heavy hits. Karen froze. Who is it? No answer. Only the sound of rain. She opened the door slowly. No one stood there. Only a muddy paw print on her welcome mat. Her heart raced. No, no, this isn't real. She backed inside, clutching her chest. The wind howled through the cracks, slamming the door shut behind her. She grabbed the phone, hands shaking. I need help. There's someone. Before she could finish, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Outside, the storm raged harder. Through the window, a faint shadow moved across the yard. Large, silent, patient. The same way Ranger once had, guarding, watching. But this time, he wasn't protecting. He was reminding. Karen dropped to her knees, sobbing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, please. But the wind answered for her, tearing the last words away. When morning came, neighbors found her collapsed by the door. She was alive, but trembling, eyes wide open, whispering the same thing over and over. He was here, he was right here. No one saw a dog that night, but muddy paw prints led from her porch, across the lawn, and disappeared into the woods. Days later, John sat beside Ranger by the lake, sunlight breaking through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The sheriff had called earlier. Karen confessed everything. The men were charged, the case closed. But John wasn't smiling. He looked at Ranger, who stared quietly at the water's edge. You found them, didn't you? John said softly. All of them. Ranger lifted his head, eyes calm. There was no anger left now, only peace. John smiled faintly. Good boy. A breeze rippled across the lake, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Somewhere behind them, thunder rolled one last time, distant, fading, like a story finally told. John stood, resting a hand on Ranger's back. Let's go home. As they walked down the trail, sunlight spilled through the trees, touching the scar on Ranger's side, making it shine like a medal. And in that golden light, the world felt still again. Justice hadn't come from law or revenge. It had come from something deeper, something that moves unseen, waiting for the right storm to rise. Because sometimes, fate doesn't shout, it whispers, and when it whispers loud enough, even monsters hear it.